we started this basically in 1868 with the 14th Amendment, which tells us that all persons who are born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens at birth. That provision of the 14th Amendment gets interpreted by the Supreme Court in a case called Wong Kim Ark in 1898 to mean that essentially the amendment means what it says: all persons who are born in the United States are citizens, with some very narrow exceptions. And the only one that really applies for the most part today is an exception for the children of ambassadors. So really the way we get here is that when Donald Trump is sworn in as president just a couple months ago in 2025, he comes out immediately with an executive order that purports at least to apply a new definition of birthright citizenship, denying that citizenship to children, to put it simply, whose parents are not, at least one parent is not a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident. So how we get to these arguments that are coming up before the court next week is that we have a bunch of different lawsuits, some brought by states, some brought by individuals represented by groups like the ACLU. We have a number of different lawsuits, but a couple of those result in nationwide injunctions, meaning that the courts are forbidding the Trump administration from applying this executive order, basically forbidding it from directing any agencies to actually put any regulations into place or adjudicate any person's benefits based on that order. And that applies across the board to everybody. So what we've got now is the Trump administration asking the Supreme Court to come in with an emergency stay on those injunctions that have been upheld by the lower courts. One reason that the Trump administration has focused on the injunction question is, I mean, one way of looking at it is they think that that's maybe the question that they're most likely to win on. So since this is an emergency appeal while the litigation is ongoing, they might think that because there are some members of the court, namely Justice Thomas and Justice Gorsuch, but potentially some others, who have been very outspoken against the ability of district courts to issue nationwide relief. I think the Trump administration might be thinking that even if we don't ultimately win on the merits here, maybe the Supreme Court does not adopt our interpretation of the 14th Amendment and our interpretation of the immigration statutes that have been passed since. Maybe we can get the Supreme Court to narrow the scope of this injunction, allow us to start implementing, creating regulations to implement this executive order in the meantime, and that might accomplish some of the goals that the administration wants. If you really think about it, I think that this is probably less likely to be a case where the Supreme Court is going to take this step, just because if that's true, if there is a solid majority against the Trump administration's fundamental position here, what the justices would be voting for if they partially stay these injunctions would be voting to have one rule of birthright citizenship for some people, maybe one rule of birthright citizenship that operates in one state but not another, one that operates for some people but not others.